walk up to anybody on the street and ask them how much of their brain they think they use. Chances are they're emphatically going to say 10%, because that's what we've been trained in our society to believe, that we use 10% of our brain. Right now, in the movie theater, there is a movie called Limitless. This film stars Bradley Cooper. It's about a failed novel writer who finds a drug he's able to take to unlock all the parts of his brain. Now in this movie, it builds upon the 10% myth. In the movie, the myth is people use 20% of their brain. So it's up just a little bit, but nonetheless. Basically, when he takes his drug, he's able to, he dives with Olympic form, he writes a novel in 4 days, he becomes a stock trader on Wall Street, makes millions of dollars in just a couple days because he's able to foresee what's going to happen because he can use his entire brain. Unfortunately, this is not believable. This is not true life. The myth of the 10% of the brain is nothing more than that. It is a myth. And so today we're going to look at the myth and where it comes from. We're going to look at how the brain actually works, and we're going to look at how to optimize the brain, or if it's even possible. The 10% myth, there's a lot of sources people attribute this myth to. Some of the common people are Albert Einstein, Pierre Florence, and Carl Lashley, and a lot of their different works that they did. People just get this idea from some different statements they made. But the most likely candidate is William James. He wrote a book entitled Energies of Men. In this book, he said, "We are making use of only a small part of our possible mental and physical resources." So because of that he said, a lot of people took that and just planted some kind of percent on it and said, okay, this is 10% of our brain that we use, in the small part that he talked about. The myth is actually absolutely false, I mentioned. Dr. Anjan Chatterjee, who's a professor of neurology at the University of Pennsylvania, said, "It's a complete myth as far as I can tell, and I've always wondered where this came from. We use all of our brain. It's not parcellated like that. Those percentages that get bandied about are complete fabrications. There is no percent. You can't put a percent on the amount of our brain that we use." And what's crazy is, despite scientific evidence to the contrary, people still continue to believe it. And on top of that, the media, such as this film, such as different advertising campaigns, they say things like, well, if you use more, people who fly with our airline use more than 10% of their brains, implying that people are smarter. But like I said, advertising really continues to just make this seem like it's true. So if it's untrue, how does the brain actually work? Well, there's three main parts of the brain. You have your cerebrum, your cerebellum, and your brainstem. Your cerebrum is the larger part of your brain, and it controls things such as cognitive thinking, such as reasoning, brainstorming, things like that. You have your cerebellum, which is the next part of the brain. It controls motor functions, so things like walking, holding your balance, things like that. Your brainstem controls involuntary actions, such as breathing, your heart beating, things like that. There's actually a lot more parts to your brain that are smaller components of those larger parts, but we're not actually going to discuss those. But your brain has several parts, and they all serve very specific functions. Scientific American writer Robin Boyd wrote an article entitled, "Do People Only Use 10% of Their Brains?" In that article, she said, "Although it's true that at any given moment all of the brain's regions are not concurrently firing, brain researchers using imaging technology have shown that, like the body's muscles, most are continually active over a 24-hour period." So what she's basically saying there is at different times we use different parts of our brains. And one thing that really comes into consideration here is multitasking, walking, chewing gum at the same time. And when you're doing something like that, of course you're using different parts of your brain at the same time, so I guess you could say you're using a higher percentage, but like I said, that's some kind of arbitrary number. There is no percentage to put on it. So now that we've looked at where the myth came from, 10%, how the brain works, the question is, in the movie, his brain is optimized. Is that reality? Can the brain actually be optimized? Well, there are some natural ways that you can optimize your brain. Of course, number one, we've heard it since we were children, sleep. You get the proper amount of sleep, your brain's going to function better. Also diet. If you're eating the proper foods, you're going to be able to think better. You're going to be able to have more focus. And of course, you can do things such as reading crossword puzzles, reading, brain teasers, things like that to kind of stretch your brain and to be able to, of course you're learning, so you're able to optimize your brain that way. There are some unnatural ways. Ritalin and Adderall are two drugs. What they do is they don't necessarily optimize your brain, but what they do is they filter out distractions so you're able to focus better on the task at hand. So in that way, you could say that they optimize your brain by giving you that power to focus. So what does all this mean? Basically, what it means is this myth, people want to believe it for a certain reason. People want to believe this myth because they believe they've got a hidden potential locked away inside of them. And this myth explains their faults. If they only use 10% of their brain, would they make a mistake? If they could use all their brain, they probably wouldn't make that mistake. Neurologist Barry Gordon at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, I think he really put it the best. He said, the myth's durability stems from people's conceptions about their own brains. They see their own shortcomings as evidence of the existence of untapped gray matter. What it boils down to? Nobody's perfect. There's no amount of our brain that we can use to be perfect. And so next time you hear somebody say something to the effect of, you know, people only use 10% of their brains, that's why I did that. Use your brain and tell them that's absolutely not true. You use all your brain.